Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, and just like the title below says, this will be my review of the third episode of HBO's TV series Lovecraft Country. Okay, so last episode it ended with the unfortunate death of Uncle George. Uncle George, who I was very worried about was going to die in the first episode, only for them to kill him off in the at the end of the second episode after Tick was reunited with his father, and like the whole mansion where the secret society of like the sons of Adam was destroyed. We don't know what happened to Christina, and we don't know what happened to William, but like everybody else like was petrified and like died. Like we saw that, and I'm good with that. And Tick, the only reason he was able to get out was because like his ancestor Hannah showed him the way, which is why it's very important, like when your ancestors are telling you something, to listen. So the show, it picks up about, I want to say like a couple of weeks or maybe even a few months after what happened the last episode. Like we had a funeral, and Tick, he has been staying with his aunt and his cousin, and there's just a certain level of tension in the air. And so Tick, he feels that it is best for him to leave. So he leaves, and and his intentions is to like go stay with his father, but that doesn't work out. So he ends up staying with Leti, and for the majority of this episode, it is a Leti centered storyline. And so in regards to like where is Leti and Tick going to stay, Leti actually came into some money, and she bought a obviously haunted looking house in a predominantly white neighborhood. It like in like the suburban Chicago area. And we're introduced to this part by Leti walking with her sister and basically telling her sister, how would you like to never have to pay rent again? That got Leti's sister's attention, as it got my attention as well. What, you telling me I ain't gotta pay rent? What do I gotta do to not pay this whole rent? And basically Leti's intention is to fix up the house and to rent it out to other Black people at an affordable price. Because the issue, which actually is kind of like today, it's very hard for some people to like rent decent living areas because the rent will be just so high. That's why sometimes it's better to own your living space rather than it is to rent. Again, depending on your finances. And then some people, they just prefer an apartment. Like, hey, it's your life, your business, your money. And so that's what ends up happening. And again, because this, despite it being like in the North, in the Midwest, where there's not supposed to be as bad, as much racism as some people would like to believe, it's still in a predominantly white neighborhood in the 1950s. And Leti, clever girl, she moved in people on a Sunday, so that way the white neighbors, not as many white neighbors were around, so she could just like move in without any trouble. But then once she's in, and people are excited about living, in a place where where the rent is affordable, because she moved in, most of her like friends, most of the people that she knows, there's this loud horn sound, like big loud horn sound. And then we look outside and we just see like rows of cars with bricks tied to the steering wheel, pressing on the horn by all the racist white folks, all the racist white neighbors. And basically, as we're seeing this, we also see like a cop car driving by, basically, and you can't tell me that this wasn't coordinated. You can't tell me that this wasn't planned. Like all of the racists got together and said, hey, at this day, at this time, we're going to do this, and make sure that the cops are around to see it. So that way everybody knows that the police aren't going to do anything about this whatsoever. because the timing was just too perfect. Because like you see, like the camera cuts closer to the police. They're just like driving by, all leisurely with like a smirk on their face. Like they're not gonna do. They're just the message is clear. These these neighbors are gonna make living here very difficult for you, and the police aren't gonna do anything about it. But this is Leti. These are black peoples in the 1950s. Like, we persevere. It's going to take more than just very loud, obnoxious, noises that eventually y'all are going to get sick of too, to prevent, to get us to move out. Like, after all this money that we spent, like all this time and energy we put into renovating this haunted looking house, I don't think so. Of course, I wouldn't have bought the haunted looking house. Like, really? This nice neighborhood, and on the way and there's an old abandoned house and nobody else wanted to buy it? Like that is the beginning of almost every haunted horror film. Like, oh, there was a murder in this house and nobody has lived in there since. What? But again, like, it's 1950s. Black people are predominantly poor because of systemic racism. So you take what you can get, and you make delicious lemonade out of lemons. And anyway, so the horning, it goes in all day and all the way up to the following morning. I don't know, maybe they're just switching out the cars or whatever. But yeah, it's still going on. And then we have a scene where Leti, she's asleep, and I guess it's like really hot, and then you just see this woman rise up out of nowhere, and her mouth is gone. It's like somebody like ripped off the jaw, or maybe they like blew her face off or whatever. It's gone. And she just, she tugs, or like some type of invisible force tugs on Leti, and she... Now I'm gonna give her some, I'm gonna give her some little bit of leeway, because when you're asleep and you're unconscious and you move around, especially if you're used to moving around in your sleep, you're going to assume that maybe you just rolled yourself off of the bed. Like, so anyway, so later on, there's like this big party because, black people are banding together, and basically just to symbolize like, hey, just because like all of you are getting together to try and make life difficult for us, it's not going to be that easy. We're still going to have a good time, because again, this is property that was bought, purchased, and is legally owned. And, and what really boggles the mind is that if this was such a problem for the neighbors, then why didn't they all band together to make sure that another white person like owned that house, if that was such a big deal? But they didn't. So now we're here, and there's this nice party. Leti's sister, she's singing, and then we also see we see Dina and her little friends. They're in some room or whatever with a Ouija board. A Ouija board? Seriously? Okay, yeah, sure. And then, they're doing the whole Ouija board thing. And one of Leti's friends, he was a black boy with like a white shirt and a tie. There was something about him that looked familiar, and I couldn't place it. Like, when I first initially saw it, I'm just thinking like, oh, was he in like a Netflix TV show? Is he on another show? Was he an extra on something? There was just something about him that just like struck something in the mind to me, and I didn't understand or know why until later. But I'll explain that at the end. But yeah, and then as they're doing it, he says like, "Am I gonna have the board answers his question like, am I going to have a good time on my trip? It tells him no. And then the children, they're like, who are you? And then the Ouija board says, I am Uncle George. And Dina is understandably upset. And she tells all of them like, oh my gosh, you're all assholes. How you going to do that? That's not funny. My daddy was, my daddy died. My daddy got shot by the sheriff. At least that's the official story that my cousin, uncle, and my cousin's friends told me, but we all really know the truth, audience people. But yeah, and she walks away. She's upset, but they're like, it moved on its own. It moved on its own. It moved on its own. That's why you don't mess with the Ouija board. And so eventually, Tick, dressed up in his uniform because he's standing guard, which is pretty smart to like have one or two black people in the front and then have one or two black people in the back, because these devious folks would have done something. And then as soon as Tick goes in, like he's talking, he's doing a little bit of mingling, and then one of the people in the house, they asked Tick like, hey, so what's the deal with you and Leti? Because word around the street is that you don't pay rent. So why don't you gotta pay rent? And then the guy, he says that he and Leti in high school, they had a tussle. Like that's what the folks called it back then, a tussle. And I guess like maybe in the 1970s, then that's when they started saying knocking boots. I don't know. And then eventually what ends up happening is that Leti and Tick, they start talking, and then they make their way into the bathroom, and then they get it on. And I didn't have a problem with this. Like, I'm okay with them hooking up. I just didn't want them to hook up while they were in that mansion around people that they didn't know. Like, that was my problem with the last episode. Like, if you saw the last episode, if you saw, like, my last review, like, that's what I had an issue with. Like, you guys can have sex in the car after you get away, but you know what? Now they're away, so you know what? Go. God bless. And I was really hoping that their relationship on a romantic level would progress, because another YouTuber that I watched, she theorized that there would be a possible like romantic relationship between Tick and Christina, which I was not here for, because again, Christina, she's not officially a member of the society, but she's still a part of it, and she has no problem with racism. So I didn't want Tick to get with a woman who was basically an agent for racism. That was my issue, and I didn't want them to get together. And also, like Journey, I just like Journey as an actress. Like, I like her as a person, and I just want any character that Journey plays, I want them to like have all of the things, because again, Journey's just so amazing. So then, yeah, like, they get it on in the bathroom while the party's going on, and then once they finish their business, then you see like a large yellowish orange light, and then you get like a sense of heat. You look out the window and you see one of them like little scrawny little racists like running off. They burnt a cross on the front lawn. I wasn't surprised, but I was still surprised, if that makes any sense. Like, it's like, oh, this was expected. I knew that they were eventually going to do something like this, but like it's still like a shocking sight to see. Like, you don't, just because like I expect it doesn't mean that I'm happy to see it, or that I still can't have a moment of disbelief. But yeah, it happened. And Leti, she rightly gets fed up with it. She gets fed up with all of it. Like, she's had to deal with like those racist sheriffs. She had to deal with like getting shot and being resurrected. She got to deal with these annoying neighbors. And now all of this, like this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Leti, she gets a baseball bat. A couple of black folks go out and they get their guns. And, Leti, she goes out, and then just like through space and time, she reaches out to the power of Beyonce's music video Hold Up, and then she takes that bat and she bam, she breaks the glass window of each and every one of those cars and unties the bricks, and all the white people are out like, oh my gosh, she's so violent, oh my gosh, she's so angry, why is she so angry, how is she so violent? Just completely like forgetting or having, convenient amnesia to the fact that you have been antagonizing and harassing this woman since the day she moved in. But no, yeah, let's act like she's violent for no reason and calls the cops. Like, the cops, they show up, and the black people, rightly so, they hide the guns, like, because we don't, that's just like a whole other mess worth of trouble. So like, yeah, let's just get rid of it. And then, Leti, she, quietly surrenders. because she doesn't want any harm to like come to the black people, because all of these racist white folks, like, they'll be fine. And then Leti, she gets arrested, and it's just her in the back with one cop and then another cop in the front seat. Like, nobody else is around. And I'm not gonna lie, I was worried that Leti might die again, if not be taken and assaulted. Like, that's going to be a consistent fear that I have on the show anytime a black person, especially like a black woman, is like alone with a racist. Like, just the fear is there every time. So I was worried that is what was going to happen to her, and then she was going to be taken to be booked if she made it there alive. But yeah. And then the officer, he is just, he's such an ass. He says, "Oh, you're Letitia. We have 21 complaints. We've got not 21 complaints, but several neighbors have made several files of complaints against you." And then she looks up and says, "And what about the 21 complaints that I filed?" He's like, I don't recall any of that." And then he asked the person driving, like, "Hey, do you remember any complaints by this woman that was made against her neighbors?" And then the driver's like, "None that I can recall." And then the officer, he starts asking her, like, "Who told you to buy this house? How were you able to buy this house?" And she doesn't really give him an answer that he likes. So then he like signals the driver to start, driving real rough, while he hangs on to like a little leather strap. And then bam, Letitia just gets thrashed all around the car. She get thrashed all around the car. Just, basically. And again, I thought that they were going to like try and like, drive it in a way where she broke her neck, because that could be a way to like cover it up. Like, oh, she the suspect was detained, but they got loose, and then it affected the driving, and that's what happened. Like, that is an effective way to cover it up. Like, I'm not going to deny, like, the racists, they can be pretty devious, and they can kind of be clever when it comes to covering up their violence. Well, not covering it up, but committing it in a way that it can be explained away. But we know the real deal. We know it. We're not going to fall for the bullshit. Like, come on. And he also says, like, we found 9 Negro bodies, and you're not going to last very long. Again, alluding to the fact that this house is haunted. And Leti, surprisingly, because I thought she was just going to stay in jail, and then Tick was going to like have to find a way to get her out. But they let her go, and I guess that's because the whole, finding 9 dead Negro bodies, like, that is a very real thing. And so they let her go, hoping that, she would be killed as well. And then Leti, she does a bit more of research, and come to find out, black people, they have been going missing, and the original owner of the house, he was like a doctor or a scientist that worked at the University of Chicago, and that he and the officer who turned out to be, I believe, the sheriff, they knew each other. So something nefarious is going on. And then while, Leti is doing her research, her sister is trying to get, the black tenants to stay. But because of Leti, because of Leti basically like taking a bat to all of those cars that were owned by white folks, a bigger target has been placed on her back. A target was already on her back because she's a black woman, and in America, especially 1950s America, and then she had the audacity to move into a white neighborhood. So there was already a target on her back, but her stunt with like the bat and the cars, that just made an even bigger target on her back. And other black folks, understandably, they don't want to be around all that, so the tenants are leaving, and they're taking their money with them. And then, Leti's sister's like, what are we gonna do? And Leti's like, it's fine. And then she lets it slip about how she came into the money. Now, I believe when it was first initially asked, Letty said that she played the numbers, aka the lottery, and that's how she got it. But what actually happened is that their mother, who was a selfish woman. I'm assuming that she had Letty's sister, Letty's brother, and Letty too young, or maybe she didn't want kids at all, but because it's the 1950s, birth control is lack thereof, and she just had to deal with it. And so because of that, she was just a very selfish woman, and she really pulled an home move. She had all this money, but she only left it to one child, and it was also like her light-skinned child, because the other two children, they're dark-skinned, so there is like that element of colorism in there too. And then Letty's reason for lying to her sister was because she didn't want to hurt her feelings, which is bullshit. And Letty's sister rightfully calls her out. She's just like, if you really cared about us, you would have split that money. But Letty didn't want to do that. She wanted all the money for herself, despite the countless times that her older siblings have bailed her out or let her stay. And, Letty's sister, she's just like, all this time I was sending you money because I thought that you were, I thought you were just a but turns out you're just and that even though their mother was selfish, at least she never put up a front and tried to pretend to be something that she wasn't. They all knew from the get-go that, they eventually learned at a very young age, which is sad, that their mother was just, a very selfish person. And so Letty's sister leaves, and so it's just Letty and Tick in the house. And Letty, because she rightly deduces that there may actually be some ghosts and some spirits up in here, she brings in a root woman, a hoodoo lady, a voodoo lady, a conjure woman, a lady that practices Obeah, like one of those like African spirituality denominations. She comes in with a goat to like do an exorcism, and then they go into the house and then they go into the basement to like do that type of thing. And while that is happening, three racist white boys with weapons break into Letty's house. And again, there is that fear that they're going in to assault her. Like, I'm gonna have it every time. I'm gonna have that fear. Like, I'm just like, okay, when's it gonna happen? It's gonna happen. Like, ain't no good gonna come from this. Like, it's the 1950s. Come on now. So yeah, they all go in, and then while they're in investigating, just trying to find Letty to, again, I believe that once they're finished assaulting her, that they will kill her. But while that is going on, the conjure woman, Letty, and Tick, they're all together. They're like holding hands and chanting, and then the ghosts come out. The black ghosts come out. And what you should never do, ever, in a horror movie, when you looking for stuff, is split up. Like, Scooby-Doo lied to us. You don't split up. You stick together for safety. But because those three racist white boys thought that they were the biggest, baddest thing in the universe, they were cocky. They were arrogant. So they split up. And so it was two, and then one went somewhere else. And then the two that were together, they went upstairs, and they went into like this really like big, nice looking room. And earlier in the party scene, Hippolyta, I believe that's what they're calling her. Her name is spelled like Hippolyta, but they pronounce it another way that I can just never remember, because I learned about Greco-Roman history first. So anytime I see that word, I think Hippolyta. But Hippolyta, she was in there, and she mysteriously saw like this really beautiful, I forgot what it's called, but it's a thing where it like maps out all of the planets. So those two out of the three racist white boys, they go in there, and then the door locks on its own. And that's when it's about to go down. And then you see, which I feel like arguably is the scariest looking thing in this show since episode 1, with those nocturnal man-eating, multi-eyed monster thingies. It was a ghost, but it had the body of a grown man and the head of an adorable baby. Now, on its own, that baby face would be so precious, but when it's on the small head of a grown man's body, it's creepy. And they were rightly scared, because the thing was like walking all Frankenstein's monster-like and going, wah, 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 in a way that, you would want to like, coddle and soothe the baby. But, again, it's so creepy. So they're freaking out, which I loved. And then while that is happening, the one white man that was like on his own, he finds an elevator. An elevator that has already been established in the show doesn't work. He opens the door. There is no elevator. And he has, in his stupidness, decides to stick his head in. Now, growing up when I was a child, my grandparents always taught me that when you go to an elevator, the door's open, but there's no elevator room. You don't go in, you don't look in, you don't investigate. You just close, you hope it comes back, or you take the stairs. Because if you don't, some could happen, like what happened to that boy. The elevator door just came rushing up and his ass. I was happy. And so after that happens, then the evil spirit actually comes about, and it's the spirit of that racist scientist, possible doctor. He comes up, and then he possesses the conjure woman, and like her eyes like all go all black out, and then she starts attacking Tick, and then eventually the evil spirit leaves her and possesses Tick. And the evil spirit in Tick's body has been saying what he has been saying. Get out of my house! Get out of my house! And Leti is just terrified. And then she calls upon the aid of the ghosts of the black people that he murdered. Because what he did, he was a serial killer. Like, just because he's a scientist and maybe he was like doing research, that doesn't take away from the fact that he was a serial killer. Just like the father of modern day gynecology. That dude was a serial killer too, who took enslaved black women and experimented on them. Like, he was a serial killer, and this dude in the story was a serial killer too. And, the ghosts of all the black people, they join hands with Leti, and then they start, chanting, they band together. And at first they look, a little bit weird. They look as the way that they kind of looked when they died after he tortured them, because again, one lady, she didn't have her mouth, and then like somebody else, I think they like lost some limbs, but they all band together, and then they slowly appear normal. And Tick, he drops to the ground, and then the evil spirit is just him with his pale looking old ass just standing there, and then they're chanting, and he's just like, it ain't the Holy Ghost that got that dude, but yeah, he's just like, he's trying to fight it. And then Leti says, now you get out of my house, because it is Leti's house. She bought it, the deed is in her name, so it is her house, and you can go. And then he is expelled, he leaves. And what I'm to assume, what I was led to believe, is that now that the evil spirit is gone, and then like the ghost of his victims have in some way avenged themselves, that they just move on to the next life, to a better life, hopefully. That's what I believe, and what I would like to believe. Like, they finished their business, they got their revenge, now they can move on, because a lot of times that's how that works. The ghost has some unfinished business. Most of the time it's revenge, and then once they get their revenge, they go on, unless they're just bitter, and then they just decide to stay and torture the next people that come along. But again, these are black ghosts, so it's not the same. And after that, I guess eventually word got around that 3 racist white boys went in, and nobody ever saw them again, because the physical harassment has stopped. Like, there's no more horns, none of that, because Leti showed everybody that she's about that life, that she's not gonna roll over easy, so try again. and she managed to get, you know, new black tenants, and then there's like a reporter lady coming in saying like, oh, you're so inspiring, and yada 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 yada, just all this good stuff. And then the elevator is working magically again, and so they go, you know, through the elevator, and then the camera cuts away, and we find out, like, you know, what happened to the bodies of those three racist white men. And while I have no problem with their bodies just staying, you know, like leave them until like it starts to stink up the place, then, you know, find a way to dispose of them properly, just like in Pose, which is also a good show. But I believe I saw like other bodies as well, and I believe those were the bodies of the black people. I wish and I hope that there will come a point in time where Leti and Tick can give them a dignified funeral of some kind, because those black people that were kidnapped, tortured, and killed, they have loved ones out there that, you know, are wondering where they're at. So I hope for their sake that, you know, that a way to properly bury them and like get word out to like the families can be made. But realistically, I know that that's gonna raise like a whole bunch of questions that nobody really needs, so it is what it is. I don't care about the families of those three racist white folks. Like, I don't care. Like, yeah, spend the rest of your life wondering what happened to them. I really don't care. But yeah, and that's basically how the episode ended. And again, it was a treat to see, like, this Lovecraft Country. I'm so glad that I'm watching this show. I am so grateful to Misha Green, and I'm so grateful to all of the actors and the writers and the costumes. Oh my god, the costumes have been on point consistently, especially Leti. She was looking fabulous, and I really liked how this was a Leti focused episode. And now, going back to what I said originally about one of Dina's friends looking familiar, like I said, there was just something about him. I wasn't sure at the time, but then it was brought to my attention that the way that he was dressed was the exact same way that Emmett Till was dressed in a picture. And Emmett Till, he's originally from Chicago. He traveled down south to, I believe, the state of Mississippi to see relatives, and then that's when that, you know, racist white lady lied on him, and he was kidnapped and brutally murdered. And so that's what the ghost was saying, like, no, you're not going to enjoy your trip because you're going to die, which is very, very sad. But I do like the fact that the show touched on that. I really am loving the fact how the show is touching on the racism, and just just like Watchmen, like I said. And that's why I feel like it's so important to like have shows that have, you know, black main characters and show creators are black, so that way they can touch, like, they don't always have to talk about it like black people. They can tell other stories too. It doesn't always have to have racism, but when they do talk about or touch on, you know, the racism, you know, and do it well, like, it can really resonate with people, which is what I really appreciate as a fellow, you know, black creative. And what I also really liked about this episode is that it really could have been, I could really see this being two different types of movies, where on the practical side, you know, Leti could have been a character that was like moving in, and then she had to like deal with all of the racism when all she wants is a better life for herself, like without the supernatural aspect. And then, yeah, another way that they could have done this, if it were a movie, is to like have this and then incorporate the supernatural stuff, like a ghost story, because, you know, the original white owner, he died, and now that he's dead, he didn't have any other relatives because he's such a pathetic, disgusting human being. He's mad that his home is being, you know, has black people living on it, and so his ghost is like causing problems, and like everybody else in the white neighborhood is in on it, and that's why they allow the black people to like move in, because they know that the black people are gonna die because they're all racist. Like I said, like, my mind, the way that it was going, it really could have been like, you know, two different types of movies, and I just loved how they meshed it all together into one. And I liked, you know, the consistent theme of black people banding together to protect one another and to defend themselves against racism. Like, Leti with the ghosts did it, and then Leti, like, with her friends and her tenants at the party, they were doing it. They were banding together. to fight racism, which I really, really, really loved. And and then I also like that we got like a little bit more background about Leti's family, because she didn't go to her mother's funeral, and as I stated before, like Leti, she had issues with her mama, and maybe she just didn't feel close to her mother. Like that was Leti's way of like dealing with the grief of the loss of her mother, if she felt any, grief for the loss of her mother whatsoever. I do think that some people, can't grasp the fact that when a parent dies, the child's not going to care. And that doesn't necessarily make the child a horrible person, because the parent could have been a horrible, abusive parent. But anyway, so that was my review of the third episode. I'm sorry that this review is so late due to technical difficulties that I'm really not going to get into. But yes, I am going to try and be more consistent and try and like get these videos up a lot earlier, if life will allow it, because life, like my job and like all this is just so crazy. But yeah, I am going to try and make more of an effort. But anyway, thank you for watching.